We are live, and you can start speaking.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Linda Abraham. I'm the president and founder of Accepted. And why don't we just wait a couple of minutes until allow stragglers to come in? It's 9:01 a.m. my time. In the comment box, can you tell me where you're located? City and state if you're in the United States, city and country if you're outside the United States. Anybody want to share that in the comment box where you're located? Again, city and state if you're in the United States, city and country if you're outside the United States. If not, I will just dive into the content while people sign in. Okay, we're going to sign in then. We're going to get going. Thank you again thank you for the first time, the GMAT Club for hosting this event. And thank you very much to attendees for joining me. And planned about 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes of presentation. The rest of this live session will be Q&A. Okay, so we have, now I'm seeing where everybody's from. We have Jonathan from New York City in the United States. From Gurgaon, India. Delhi, India. Kerala. A lot of people from India here. And yep, a lot from India, the United States, Zurich, Switzerland. Great. Welcome from near and far, wherever near is, wherever far is. Welcome to Seoul. Oh, great. Nepal. Whoa, good. Okay, wonderful. So just a little bit about me before we dive into the content. I founded Accepted in 1994. I'm also the co-founder of the Association of International Graduate Admissions Consultants and served as its first president. I co-authored MBA Admissions for Smarties. I've been quoted in the Wall Street Journal, Poets and Quants, Business Because, U.S. News, and many other media and MBA admissions over the last 26 years. And I've been a member of the GMAT Club since 2003. Now, we have a gift for participants in today's events, and that is the MBA Admissions Calculator, the quiz. It's free. Are you ready to apply? It'll give you an assessment, and you can get to it at accepted.com/MBA quiz GC. Again, just take a note of that. Accepted.com, Mexico too, really all over. Wonderful. Accepted.com/MBA quiz GC. Okay. Now, the title of today's webinar is Target Schools versus Stretch Schools versus Safety Schools. I'd like to first define what those schools are. Okay. What those terms mean. So what are target schools? They are the schools where you have a competitive profile based on your statistics, your goals, and assessment of your cultural fit with the school. And if you're going to be applying to a target school, that means your test scores and GPA are really close to or above, slightly above the school's average. Your work experience shows that you have what to contribute to class discussions. You meet the school's non-statistical criteria, which many schools state very clearly, whether you're applying to Harvard or Stanford or Chicago Booth or INSEAD, many of them or Haas, almost all of them very clearly state what they're looking for. Some more clearly than others, but most of them, it's pretty clear. And then the last thing that they're going to want to look for is that you identify both in thought and deed with the school's mission and values. And how can you determine that? That will be based on online research. And by that, which is obviously what most of us are doing these days, going thoroughly through their website, following them on social media, attending online events, be it online fairs like the MBA Tour or events such as what GMAT Club hosts, or events hosted by the schools, and schools are hosting tons of events now. It can also be interactions with current students and recent alumni. Many business schools have ambassador programs or other programs by other names where you can interact with current students and recent alumni. This should all be part of the research that you do to determine what schools are target schools, safety schools, and research and stretch schools. And in particular, to be able to show this kind of cultural fit and identity with a school's mission and values. What about stretch schools? These are either schools that accept less than 20% of the applicant pool. I think that automatically puts a school in the stretch category for most applicants. There can be a few applicants that are still, they'll be target, but it's really very, very few when you're talking about schools that reject 4 or more out of every 5 applicants. The other definition of a stretch school is one where you individually fall short in terms of your competitiveness and what you bring to the table as a prospective applicant, prospective student, as an applicant and prospective students. So what do I mean by that? Okay, well, the obvious one is your stats are below average. How much below? I mean, if it's a little bit below, I don't think it's going to blow you out of the water or prevent you from getting accepted. But if you're going to twist my arm and force me to give you a number and a rule of thumb, for most applicants, it's going to be if you're 30 points or more below on the GMAT, 8 or more points below on the total GRE score, 0.3 or more below on the 4.0 US GPA scale. And I see there are a lot of people here from outside the United States, and I'll touch on that in a minute because obviously the grading doesn't match exactly. Or if you have less than 3 years of full-time work experience, you probably are dealing with below average stats that could turn any potential school into a stretch school for you. And the more elements that are stretchy, if you will, the less likely it is that you're going to get accepted. Now, work experience, it's easy to say I have X months of full-time work experience, but there's also a qualitative element to work experience being competitive. That, again, you can get much more from looking at the profiles of the current students. Is your work experience similar in terms of responsibility that you're having and the impact that you're making on the job to those people that were admitted to those programs? So that's the qualitative element of work experience. The other element that the schools really want to see is, are you showing growth and increasing responsibility on the job? So sometimes it's very easy for schools to assess quality if you're coming from a well-known company. However, if you come from a small business or a non-international company, you can still show an increase in responsibility and enormous impact on the job that will still impress the schools and qualitatively show that you have the work experience they're looking for. And then there's the non-statistical criteria that I mentioned earlier. Can you show in word and deed that you identify with the school's mission and values and meet its criteria? I've talked to many applicants, clients and non-clients, who say, well, I identify with this, but when I ask them, well, what have you done? They fall short in saying that they really support that mission. So make sure that your deeds mesh with your stated values. And if your deeds fall short, again, that would turn the school, that would be one element that could turn an otherwise competitive school into a target school, rather into a stretch school. If you fall short on all these areas, then you might be in the territory where just forget that program and apply to other programs where you are more competitive. What about safety schools? Safety schools are somewhat like a life jacket. They increase the chances that you'll survive the application process and start your MBA in the attendance cycle. Safety schools are not like an old Groucho Marx joke, or the school that you would never want to attend. That is not a safety school. Applying to that school is simply a mistake and a waste of time and money. So a safety school is one where you're fairly confident of acceptance to this program. Your academic and that confidence is based on the fact that your stats are above average for the school. Your work experience is qualitatively superior and impressive. You have accomplishments showing you identify with the school's mission and values and meet its criteria. So now that we know what we're talking about, how do you choose where to apply? Again, the name for this live video is Target Schools versus Stretch Schools versus Safety Schools, how to decide. Well, the truth is you don't have to decide among them. It's not mutually exclusive. You can apply to all three categories. And for the overwhelming majority of applicants, that's exactly what you should do. It's not target schools versus stretch schools versus safety schools. It's target schools and stretch schools and safety schools, how to decide. So again, it's a catchier title with versus, so I didn't ask GMAT Club to change it, but that would be my recommendation. The first criteria in choosing where to apply, which is the second part of the title, how to decide, is you want to apply to programs that support your goals. Business school is not an end in itself. It is a means to an end. And it's going to take you where you're at now in your life and career and transition you to where you want to be. It's a bridge between where you are now and where you want to be in the future. So any program you apply to, be it target, stretch, or safety, has to support your goals. How do you determine if it supports your goals? I'll tell you. One, look at the curriculum. Is it what you want to study and how you want to study it? Two, what about placement strengths? Does the school have the placement strengths that you want? If you're interested in management consulting, does a large percentage of the class go into management consulting? If you're interested in healthcare, did you know that Vanderbilt's own school, I believe, placed last year 18% of its class in healthcare? That might be a really good school for you to consider if that's your goal. What about the extracurricular opportunities in the schools? If you're interested in entrepreneurship, does it have case competitions and entrepreneurial competitions in front of venture capitalists rather? Does it have, if you're interested in investment, is there an investment fund that you can potentially manage? There's all kinds of extracurricular opportunities that these schools offer, and you have to see if those are the ones that support your goals. In addition to also, by the way, perhaps allowing for just some fun. If you're interested in rugby, does it have a rugby team? I just interviewed a MBA student who's on the rugby team at Columbia. If you're interested in snow sports, does it have those kinds of clubs? So, also look at that. And that leads to the last of my 4 criteria is, and in terms of things that you should look at, is in terms of your personal preferences. Do you prefer American, European, Asian schools? Where do you want to live? Do you prefer a warm climate or a cold climate, or do you simply not care? Do you prefer urban, a school like Columbia or NYU located in a big city, or do you prefer something that's either in a small city or a rural area like Darden, which is in Charlottesville, Virginia, or Dartmouth, Tuck in Hanover, New Hampshire? It's very rural, very beautiful, but very rural. These are things that you should consider and weigh in. I think the most important ones, though, are the curriculum, the placement strengths, and the extracurricular opportunities. And again, anything that you go to, any school you apply to, you should see as leading you to achieving your goals and helping you realize the reasons that you want to get an MBA. Otherwise, you are wasting your time and money, both in applying and attending. And then the second part of the equation in terms of choosing schools, you want to choose schools where you are competitive. Okay, that's the other part. And that's kind of where the stretch, safety, and target comes in. So the target schools, they're where the happy face is. That's where the schools likely to want you and the schools you want to attend overlap. You never want to go to a school that, again, you wouldn't attend. That makes no sense. Now, in terms of target, again, it's where the happy face is, smiley face, the green area. Go. That's where most of your application should be sent. If you have a school that you'd love to attend, maybe because of the brand, maybe because it's just right on in terms of your educational needs and your goals, but you're not quite competitive at it, maybe you're kind of, I don't know if you can see my cursor, in the yellow area, just to the left of the words in the right circle. Okay, give it a try, but don't apply only in this area because you're asking for rejection. And then there's the schools you really, really want to attend. They still support your goals. But maybe they don't have quite the brand you're looking for. You want a better brand. And maybe they're, again, to the left of the green and to the right of the words. I'd again apply to 1 or 2 of those to make sure to increase the chances that you are definitely admitted this upcoming cycle. So how many schools do I recommend you apply to? For most people, I recommend 4 to 8 schools. That is a range. Again, it depends really how many you have in the left circle and how many you have in the right circle. The more you have in the right circle, the more I suggest you apply to. The more you have in the left circle, especially if it's on the left side of the green area, or the more the light yellow-green area, then I would say you can probably apply to fewer. If you're limited geographically, or you have a significant other that's maybe has a job or specific needs, again, then you can apply to fewer. 3 to 5 works if you skip or limit your stretch programs, or if you feel other programs really don't support your goals. There are some people, it does happen, who went to outstanding undergraduate schools, have incredible positions today, and very specific goals. And it's true, they should apply maybe to only 1 or 2 schools, but it's pretty unusual. And if those schools, again, have these very low acceptance rates, it's basically either these schools or I'll manage my career without an MBA. That's okay. There are some people like that. Most people don't fall into that category. Most people have specific goals that they need an MBA to achieve. And again, for them, I apply 4 to 8 or 3 to 5 if you stay mostly in the left-hand circle or are geographically limited. If the world is your oyster, and especially if you want to apply to more aspirational schools, then I'd suggest you apply to 6 to 8, spread over 2 rounds. And I would recommend 1 to 2 stretch, 4 to 5 competitive, 1 to 2 safety. And that way you're going to increase the likelihood that you're going to start business school in 2021 and minimize the chances that you have to reapply. Some people come to us and they'll say, I'm still fairly young. Maybe they have 3 or 4 years of work experience. What I'd like to do is try and apply to 1 to 2, 3 stretch schools this year, maybe even 4 stretch schools this year. And if I get in, great. And if I don't get in, I'll apply again next year and I'll apply more widely. That's fine. That's a legitimate strategy. It makes sense. But do it with your eyes open. So here, what I've done, I think I've given you a broad overview. There are lots of exceptions, and applicant situations are rarely as clear as the examples and guidelines I've provided. Sometimes, your undergraduate GPA is a little bit lower than you'd like. Your GMAT is great. Your work experience is great, but you struggled in college. Other times you did great in college, but you're struggling with the GMAT or the GRE or whatever test it is that you're taking. Sometimes there's illness that kept you out of work for a while, or perhaps you have a blemish, like a lengthy period of unemployment, and I don't mean COVID related, F's on your transcript, a misdemeanor or academic dishonesty on your record, a legal infraction on your record. You may feel you can only apply to 2 schools because of where you're located and personal or family needs. And those are all legitimate factors. And again, I've tried to give you an overview, not an exact formula, with a couple of exceptions. But the one constant for all of you under any circumstances is that any school you apply to should be one that will help you achieve your goals and where you'd be happy to attend. So this implies that you have to know what your goals are and also what's going to make you happy in a business school program. So a little bit of both self-reflection and research needs to be done. Now, we at Accepted are happy to guide you in choosing the right schools for you and in applying effectively based on your qualifications and goals. And there's 2 ways that we can help you. One, I already mentioned. There's the MBA admissions calculator, the Are You Ready to Apply quiz. And that's a free assessment. It also gives you tips how to improve on the areas where you fall short. So again, accepted.com/MBA quiz GC. Try it out. It's free. Accepted also provides admissions consulting. We can provide feedback on your school choice or help you choose a realistic list of schools to apply to, advise you on mitigating weaknesses. And of course, we can guide you one-on-one so that you choose where to send your applications wisely and then present your qualifications effectively, because that's the other, you not only can be you have to be qualified and competitive, but you have to present those qualifications effectively. Both steps ensure that you maximize your chances of acceptance and scholarship money. And right now, this is coincidence, if there is such a thing. Right now, through tomorrow, Accepted actually has a price rollback to 2017 prices. We scheduled a rollback separately from this live webinar, but I realized that they are coinciding. So if you are interested in our services and you purchase today or tomorrow, you can save some money. And with that, I'm really happy to take your questions. Again, the quiz, just so you have the URL, it's accepted.com/MBA quiz GC. And for information about our services, it's accepted.com/MBA/services. And I'm going to turn off the screen. Everybody get the URLs. If not, I'm sure Abhijit will post them again. And I'm ready for your questions. Okay, so we have a question here. How to think if one should apply early action to some schools? One would have to retract their 1-on-1 applications without getting a decision elsewhere if they got binding e-admit at some place. I assume you're referring to Columbia, or at least that's the most famous one that has that policy. I would only apply early action if you are really committed, if that's your first choice school under those circumstances. If you know that that's your number one school, apply early action, because that, your chances of acceptance are higher. However, in the case of Columbia, they've also made it really clear that the acceptance rate, if you want to have more options, is early in the regular decision cycle is basically the same as for the early action cycle. Early decision cycle is what it's called at Columbia. So I don't know other schools that have that policy have the same stats, but Columbia's made it really clear that that is true. So if Columbia, I'll pick on Columbia, is the school that you're talking about, and you know it's your first choice, apply early action. If it's not your first choice, but you like it and you'd like the kind of boost, the statistical boost that comes with applying early action, apply regular decision, but very early in the regular decision cycle. Okay, next question. Okay, the question is, I have a GMAT score from a test that was taken a while ago. Is it a problem if the score expires before joining the program, but is valid until I get my admit to a B school? I would check with the individual schools on that one. I think for most of them, if it's valid until the round in which you apply, you're okay, but do check with the individual schools, because I think there is some difference in policies there. Next question. Okay. The question is, how important does age play a role in admissions? Is it important that European colleges are more open to 30+ students? In the United States, it is true that European average age for MBA programs is slightly higher than Americans. In American schools, European schools, it tends to be right around 30, maybe even low 30s for some programs, IMD in particular. I think INSEAD, it's like 29, 30. The key thing in the United States isn't the age as much as the amount of work experience. So business schools, career centers, and programs are geared to people with 3 to 8 years of work experience and that level of seniority. And career placement is also geared towards people with that much experience and an MBA. If you come in with significantly more experience, schools may be worried about placing you. So if you come in and you say, I want an entry-level investment banking position, and investment bankers prefer to hire people in their late 20s and mid 30s, they could be concerned about your ability to get a job. If you come in and you say, and you're in your mid 30s and you say, I'm a serial entrepreneur, I want to start my own business as soon as I leave, well, they're not going to worry about that. So some of it has to do with the amount of experience you have, the realism of your career goals post-MBA, and also, why do you want an MBA? Does it make sense? If you're making more than most MBA graduates make, and you're at a level in your career that is above what most MBAs are, they're going to wonder, why do you really want this? Are you going to be a happy student here? So it's not really age as much as level of experience. Okay, I hope I answered that question. How to choose between 1-year versus 2-year MBAs. All right. In general, there are exceptions to this. INSEAD is a notable exception to this. The 2-year MBA programs are really great for career changers because you have the possibility for an internship in the middle of the program. 1-year MBA programs are great for career enhancers or people sometimes sponsored by their employer and returning their employer. They're not really looking to explore another career. The summer internship is going to be nice, but it's not something that they really need to make that transition. So that would be one of the, certainly the probably the major criteria that I would use. Another criterion rather, is whether you have a business undergrad or not. So for example, Kellogg has its 1Y program or 4-quarter program is specifically for people with business undergrads or a significant amount of undergraduate business education. Cornell's accelerated program is for people who already have a master's degree. And again, they're not looking for a major career change. So look at the individual programs and weigh it up. But the main difference is how important is that internship to you in making a career transition. Now, I mentioned INSEAD at the beginning. INSEAD, you can start in January, the January intake, and have a short internship in the summer. Or you can start in their September intake and have an internship at the end of the programs. That's how they work it. And they say that their graduates are almost all career changers. So INSEAD is one option where the 1 year versus 2 year may not hold, but you also have to meet INSEAD's very specific criteria. Okay, I hope I did answer that one. Will giving the online GMAT affect AdCom decision for one's profile if one intends to apply for 22 intake? From what I understand, no. They're weighing it equally. Anybody I've asked about it or seen interviewed about it say they're taking it. So no. Is it recommended to reapply to B schools that offered you admission previously, but you were not able to join due to some reasons? That would probably depend on the reasons. If there was a personal emergency, military call up, something like that, and you were respectful of the school and let them know and asked for a deferral and were very above board with them, then yeah, sure, reapply. They were interested in you, you're interested in them, you had a good reason to defer. If you're deferring because you wanted to try your luck at higher ranked schools and maybe you let them know at the last minute or you played some games with them, then it probably doesn't make sense to reapply. If you were unable to attend due to visa restrictions and COVID, I would definitely reapply. I think it would make sense. Okay, my eventual aim is to settle in Canada. Not very keen on USAB schools given the political and visa problems going on. Does it make any sense to apply to European schools as a stretch option? I could see that it would. I mean, if you graduate from a top business school, it's not going to hurt your chances of going to Canada. But if you want to settle in Canada, I would recommend you apply mostly to Canadian business schools because it will ease your transition and finding a job and all that. That'd be my suggestion. Let's see. Thank you for the questions, everybody. You're asking really great questions. One of the administrative heads of a top EUB school went through my profile and mentioned it is what they're looking for. Is it too generic? And do they say similar things to everybody? I don't think they say that to everybody. Okay, number one. Does it mean you're accepted? No. Does it mean it makes sense for you to apply at that program? I think so. I would certainly give it that much credibility. I would not apply only to that school, though. How's that? Okay. Next question. What advice would you give for younger applicants with 3 to 4 years of work experience? Good question. You're all asking excellent questions, by the way. I think 4 years of work experience isn't really younger, at least not at U.S. schools. 3 years of work experience is on the younger end. And the key to show for you is to show the maturity and growth that other people take 5 or 6 years to show. It's easier said than done, but it can be done. Just you show that you've had impact, show that you've taken initiative, demonstrated leadership, really good growth on the job. As I said, impact is another thing. and they will seriously consider your application. Have clarity in your goals. You don't want to come across as somebody who just doesn't like your job and wants 2 years off. That will really, really help you. Okay. Okay. How much does experience weigh compared to academic performance? They both weigh. They both weigh very much. I have a whole webinar on Accepted. I think it's called 7 Steps to MBA Acceptance. And we deal with kind of the not exactly your question, but the different elements. Business schools are looking for multiple things. So if your question is, can work experience make up for academic performance? Somehow, some way, you have to show multiple things in your application in order to show you're qualified. One, you have to show you can do the work. Okay, that's academic performance. Now, there are multiple ways to show academic performance. One is your undergraduate transcript. Another is your test score. A third is by taking on intellectually challenging work, things at work. A fourth is by creating an alternative transcript if your grades were poor, or taking quant classes and getting A's in them if your quant score is a problem, or taking classes in written communication if your verbal score is a problem, or maybe joining test masters. Any of those things can show that you really have more intellectual ability than either your transcript or test score is revealing. If both of them are low, it's pretty hard. Now, what if work experience is lacking? That's more problematic for most programs. But a question again is whether it's quantitatively lacking or qualitatively lacking. If it's quantitatively lacking, time tends to take care of that. You just work another year. If it's qualitatively lacking, then you have to step up to the plate and assume greater responsibility to the extent possible, or change positions to show that you have the kind of qualitative work experience that will allow you to contribute to class discussions and also enable you to get the kind of job that the business school places people in after your MBA. If you're on the younger end and you're looking, I was talking about work experience, but there also is extracurricular experience. Your question doesn't limit it to just work experience. And realize that community service, activities, activism on campus, this also plays a role and is a great way for you to show impact, leadership, initiative outside of your work environment. Okay, I hope I answered that question. How to discern if the school will be a good cultural fit. I touched on that a little bit earlier, but again, first of all, what the school says on the website, many schools do post their criteria. So read them. That's number one. Number two, attend school events. There are many, many online events. I know we have a very international group here today. So at this point, geographic distance is no obstacle for learning about a school. And then in addition, do reach out to current students and recent alumni. I would say reach out to 2 groups. Reach out to people who come from backgrounds similar to you, both professional and ethnic geographic, and also reach out to people in the field that you want to go into, whether they're from your background or not. If you can find somebody from your background, great. And if not, don't stress about it. A lot of the MBA, as I mentioned earlier, it's a bridge to where you want to go. So don't just look backwards, look both forward and backwards. Like when you drive a car, you're mostly looking forwards, but you're also looking at the rear view mirror. Okay. I hope that helped. Okay, which months of the year are crucial for international students to apply for U.S. colleges? Is there a specific bracket? I'm not sure what you mean by bracket there. In terms of months, most U.S. business schools have rounds, the specific deadlines, and if you apply by that date, Columbia is an exception. If you apply by that date, you get an answer by a specific date. So I would encourage international applicants to apply round 1 and round 2. I encourage most people to apply round 1 and round 2. But for internationals, the added reason is that it gives you time for visa processing, assuming we start processing visas. But yeah, that would be my answer there. And round 1 is usually in September or October. Round 2 is usually the beginning of January. do MBA courses like help in admission, like core or MBA math, if you come from a non-technical background? Yes, they allow you to show that you have the quant skills necessary to succeed. They also can help if your GMAT quant score isn't quite what you want and you can't get it up for some reason. And they can help if your quant grades aren't as, what you wanted them to be. So they can help. Next question. Are we out of questions? Or did I just go faster than anticipated? When you say 3 or 4 years of work experience, is that at the time of applying or starting the MBA? That's at the time of matriculation. That's what I'm talking about. Okay. Next. What do you see as challenges for someone applying to business school, mostly European, with 14 years of non-traditional career? Ooh, well, if you're applying to the traditional 2-year full-time MBA program with 14 years of work experience, the first challenge is, why do you want an MBA now? What do you want to do with it? And is it reasonable for somebody with your level of experience? That's challenge number one. Challenge number two is what you want to do with it reasonable for somebody at your stage of life in the particular economy that you're going to be graduating into? So what do I mean by that? Again, I alluded to this earlier. If you say you want to become an investment banker at, let's say, 38, okay? Well, investment banks don't really want to hire a 38-year-old for an entry-level investment banking position because they work like nuts. And most 38-year-olds don't want to work like that. And the same, they might, if the economy is, the job market gets really tight, then they'll loosen their standards. But they may not want to. And the same with entry-level management consulting positions. So those are the two kind of big obstacles for people with 14 years of work experience. At the same time, you say it's all non-traditional. I don't know quite what that means, but so there'll be, why the change? What are you doing now? Why? Now there are programs aimed at full-time programs aimed at older applicants, more experienced applicants. Those would be the Sloan Fellows Program at MIT Sloan, at London Business School, and also the MSX in Management at Stanford. Obviously, MIT and Stanford are not in Europe, and you've said mostly European. European schools do tend to be a little bit older, and IMD in particular has a full-time 1-year MBA program that's aimed at people who are usually in their early 30s, but I don't think they're going to stop at that. So one thing you can do is look at the programs that are full-time, so that appears to be, from your question, what you prefer, and aimed at somewhat more experienced students. You probably get more out of it that way too, because you're going to learn from your peers. Okay, next question. Thank you. At what point does it make a better sense to do an executive MBA part-time online program versus a traditional full-time program? Craig, that's a good question. Well, some of that is experience related, and some of that is personal preference related. The executive and part-time programs are difficult. They are grinds. They don't have the extracurricular opportunities that the full-time MBA program has. On the other hand, you can take to the office every lesson you get the next morning. You are usually learning from and learning with a more experienced cohort and classmates. It takes longer to finish, but you don't have the opportunity cost of the full-time MBA program, so they tend to be less expensive because, again, you don't have that opportunity cost. They usually are better, especially the part-time MBA, for career enhancers as opposed to career changers. And in terms of the executive MBA, it's usually for people who are somewhat more advanced in their career, usually in middle management, aiming at senior management. So those are some things that you have to weigh up. I don't think I can tell you at this point in your career, go executive MBA. Usually it's people in their early 30s, mid 30s who think more about the executive MBA versus the full-time program. And again, if you are more interested in the full-time but are also more experienced, you may look at the Sloan Fellows program at MIT and London Business School, the Stanford MSX, IMD's program in Switzerland, or some of the, those programs. Again, Cornell's accelerated program is also slightly older. So I hope I helped with that. I didn't quite answer that one. Next question. Have you seen in your career international applicants who went all in second rounds, i.e. didn't apply in first rounds and got into top U.S. schools nevertheless? Absolutely. Many times. It's not a big deal at all. The question is much more about visas. But have they gotten in? Absolutely. And nobody knows what the situation is going to be in terms of visa processing in the spring. Okay, here's another question. If one does not have spectacular records to show for extracurricular activities, what other area should that applicant focus on to strengthen his or her application? Well, there's nothing wrong in starting extracurricular activities now. I mean, I don't see why strengthening another area of your application will help the area that's weak. But I mean, I would assume if, let's say you're a working professional and you haven't been strong in extracurriculars and your job is very demanding, you could just try excelling on your job. But my probable advice would be to choose something. It doesn't have to be a lot, but something that you're willing to commit to. On some level, it could be through your job, it could be in your community, it could be a sports or arts activity that you do with others that allows you to show impact. Realize that if you start that activity now, and I realize it's easier for me to say than for you to do, and you apply round 1 and round 2, and maybe you're waitlisted, and you've been involved in having impact in this extracurricular activity, then in 6 months, you could perhaps write something much more substantive about that activity than you can write right now. And that could be a tremendous help to you if you are waitlisted. And of course, if you're rejected and reapply, which I know you don't want to think about, but it does happen, then suddenly this extracurricular activity is a year-long commitment and not such a trivial matter anymore. So that would be my advice. Next question. If I plan to apply to 10 schools, what fraction of them would you recommend to be stretch, target, and safe schools? I would, well, without knowing anything about you, I assume you were at the earlier part of the presentation. I would probably say 5 target, 3 stretch, and 2 safety, or alternatively, maybe 4 stretch, 5 target, and 1 safety, something like that, something in that range. Does it reflect badly to ask explicitly about scholarship from a program if not offered originally? Obviously, given that your profile is at least good enough for the same. Well, it's kind of a negotiating issue. So I'm going to assume that you were accepted at a school. If you were also accepted at another school and you respectfully go to the school that you really want to go to and didn't get a scholarship from, let's call it school A, and you say, I'd love to attend your school. I will immediately accept your offer of acceptance. But school B offered me X thousands of dollars, and it really makes a difference to my budget, my financial status. Is there any way you can match? I really appreciate your consideration. You're humble. You're appreciative. It might come through. If you don't have that other scholarship offer, you can still go to them and, again, respectfully, courteously say, I'd love to attend your school, but money is a problem for me. Is there any possibility of a scholarship? Really appreciate your consideration. Thank you so much for your time. The worst thing they do is say no, and then you have a choice as to whether to attend or not, or get a loan or not. Okay. Next question. Does being European count as an advantage to U.S. schools generally or at particular programs? Is international experience more valuable? I'm Irish for what that's worth. Great webinar so far. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you for the feedback. Generally speaking, Europeans are slightly underrepresented at U.S. schools. So yes, I would say that being European, being Irish is an advantage when applying to U.S. programs. Obviously, it's not the only thing. They're going to look at everything else I discussed at the beginning of the webinar. And is international experience more valuable? Absolutely. We're living in a global world. We're seeing that more and more every day with the pandemic. It's not localized at all. It's global. And if you have global experience, multicultural experience, if you're multilingual, that's definitely valued by U.S. schools. Next question. At what point do you want to address lower grades directly? I have a 3.35 in engineering from a top engineering school with 1 D and 2 Cs. I feel like I'm on the edge of needing to explain. Family tragedy. Definitely. You should explain. It's not so much explaining, it's providing context. What were you dealing with at the time? If you have a 3.35 and the 1 D and 2 Cs were at a particular time of family pain, schools can understand that. And you can even break out your GPA when you weren't dealing with those issues and show what you're really capable of in the context, in providing context. So don't feel like you can't apply because of that, but do provide the context that the schools need to understand that dip in grades. Okay, next question. For someone who has experience of 3 out of 4 big firms and 7 years of experience, 3 years in core investment banking, which school should I be aiming for in 1-year MBA programs in Europe? Okay, you know what? I can't answer that question because I don't know what you want to do afterwards. I said before, and I'll say it again, one of the key drivers in deciding where to apply is what you want to do after business school. The second reason I can't answer the question is I don't know anything about your academic qualifications. Your work experience sounds good, but it also sounds like you jumped around a bit. So I'd probably want to talk to you about that and find out what were the reasons for all those changes. If that was all for increased responsibility, great. That might lead me to question, why do you want an MBA now? But that's a different question. So I'm going to say that's all I can tell you right now. Next question. Does switching careers many times without any promotion aggravate the profile? I don't know what TQSM means. Anybody want to tell me what TQSM means? Maybe Abby, you can tell me what that means. Well, whatever it means, the question. Yes, if you switch careers a lot and frequently, it's not a plus. A little bit of switching is okay. And you should certainly, again, provide context so that the schools will understand why the changes were. It has to be addressed somehow in your application. Do product management careers prefer students in late 20s versus those in their late 30s? I think it would depend very much on what you've done. I don't think I can answer that. I'm sorry. I don't know the answer. But I do know we had on the podcast, if you go to blog.accept.com/listen-MBA, we have a couple of podcasts fairly recently with people in the whole product management field. I can't remember the number of it, but if you skim through the podcast there, you'll see something. Okay. Which non-US programs are good for tech recruitment? Oh, that's a good one. Non-US programs. Toronto Rotman, London Business School. Just had a webinar with them. They're really growing in tech. I think Waterloo. I think it's Western, the Ivy School of Business in Canada. Those would be ones I'd look at. ISB in India. That should get you started. Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you. Okay, you're very welcome. Any particular advice for applicants from engineering startups? Well, what was your impact on the job? What was your role in the startup? How was the startup done? That's going to be key. Okay, what was your part of it? Again, you want to show impact. You want to show initiative, creativity, people skills. Go for it. Anybody? Any more questions? Is product management considered a good pre-MBA role and more relatable role like consulting or IB? Well, I don't know what the relatable part of the question means, but product management is definitely a good pre-MBA role. Yes, it is. Next question. Are there any more questions? Would a master's in CS from a top US school hurt or boost your chances? Well, it depends how you did in the master's and what you've done since the master's. If you got good grades in the master's, it would boost your chances. If you got poor grades in the master's, it would hurt your chances. If then you'd also have to address why you want a second master's. If you have a good reason, then it's fine. Then you have these additional technical skills to balance the more broader degree, the MBA degree. So this is one of those it depends answers that you're going to have to get from me. But in general, it's a good thing. Certainly, it rarely hurts. Go ahead. Could you elaborate more on global international experience? I work in tech department of a global investment bank, liaise with clients in UK and US, and develop teams in Canada. Canada, Shanghai. Does it count as global? Yes. Yes. Sounds very global to me. Mm-hmm. Make it clear in your application that you are working with an international. You're working internationally, even if you're located in one place. Okay. You're welcome. I see some thank yous coming in. You're welcome. Any concluding comments? Wait, well, here's one more question. You're very welcome, John. John asked, I'm interested in working with Accepted. Thank you. Wonderful. We'd love to work with you. How are you different from other admissions consulting firms? Thank you for the webinar, by the way. You're very welcome. Well, I think there's the key differentiator for Accepted is simply experience. We've been in business for 26 years. Our staff is highly, highly experienced. We have people on the team with 30 years worth of admissions experience, both as admissions directors and as consultants. 10, 20, 30 years experience is quite typical and Accepted. That's one thing. And again, just the longevity in business, I think, is especially under one management, that's, I think, pretty unique. I shouldn't say pretty unique. It's either unique or it's not unique, but it's pretty distinctive, I should say. I think that's more accurate. And then the other part is with Accepted, and this is, I don't think it's unique to us, but it is something that is different from a lot of firms, is that you work consistently with one consultant, barring illness or something like that. You work consistently with one consultant. You're not shunted around to different people. It's not that you meet with one person, somebody else edits your essays. That person becomes expert in your story and helping you tell your story to the schools. Yes, they know business school admissions. Yes, they know the business schools. But that ability to become expert in helping you tell your story, which is the task at hand, is, I think, another strength of Accepted. The other thing I want to point out, and I don't have the URL, but if you can find it on the site, take a look at the feedback. It's all from different applicants. You can recognize different voices there. They're all going to be talking. Many of them are going to be saying how their consultant went above and beyond. And that's what I expect of them. We're definitely in business. We do charge. But the dedication of the consultants is something that many, many, many people have commented on in their feedback. Okay, more questions here. It is usual. Oh, wait, there was one more question. The question was, is it very usual in Europe to do a master's after a bachelor's, 5 years in total? Should we make that clear in the application for U.S. schools? The U.S. schools will know that. I wouldn't worry about it. Any concluding remarks? Thank you very much for coming again. I guess the one remark I would make is I'm just going to review a couple of things from the slides, from the presentation part. One, I don't think the question really is target versus stretch versus safety. I think it should be all three. And I think you need to apply to schools that support your goals and where you're going to be competitive, where you have a chance of success. So once again, we're more than happy to help you with that. We have the free MBA admissions quiz, which will give you not only an assessment of your readiness to apply, but tips as to how to improve in areas of weakness. And again, we're more than happy to help you one-on-one as your consultant and guide through the MBA application process. Thank you very much to GMAT Club for hosting this live event. And thank you very much to participants for your time, your attention, and your questions, which were excellent. I've really had a good time.